The skilled assassin calmly aimed his sniper rifle, intently watching the movements of his prey. The man was enjoying a luxury life, unaware of the impending disaster. He was unaware of the disaster approaching, and was further engaged in a discussion about the technology with the engineer. The man, interested in discussing the technology of the luxury life, exited the hotel. The moment he stepped out, a bullet shot out like lightning. The assassin had completed his mission. Afterward, he calmly packed up his equipment and disguised himself as a regular passerby, disappearing around the corner. This murder case sent shockwaves through the police station. It was like a bomb, particularly shocking to Special Agent Anthony, who was extremely angry because he had been investigating the victim for several days prior. He was so close to catching him, he never expected the assassin would act a step ahead of him. This frustration was truly hard to swallow. In fact, not much time had passed since then. There was no American Drug Enforcement Administration in Mexico. They were conducting operations targeting warehouses that contained prohibited goods in cooperation with the police. The operation was led by Special Agent Anthony from the American Drug Enforcement Administration. The special unit immediately began action. They heavily surrounded the warehouse, and the warehouse employees were also very powerful. Afterwards, the police used police dogs to search the entire warehouse. They searched, but even after a thorough investigation, they could not find any prohibited goods. Just when Anthony thought the operation would fail, he spotted a figure in the second-floor office. He found a silhouette and immediately led his team. They burst in, and in the office were the warehouse owner and his secretary. They were moving around busily, but not to hide prohibited goods. They were on the phone. They were reporting information on the phone, and Anthony and his team hurried over. They rushed and stopped their actions. While checking the restroom, they caught the giant Chico by surprise. No one expected it, but on the way down, Chico suddenly reached out. He burst into the second warehouse. When Anthony caught up with his companions, he found the window broken, clearly indicating that Chico had escaped through there. Anthony immediately contacted the team on the lower floor and requested them to prepare to capture him. Anthony's bald colleague was talking on the phone with his wife about preparing the baby's room downstairs. I was talking with my wife on the phone about it. At that moment, Chico suddenly jumped down from the upper floor, and the bald man was killed. When Anthony rushed over, he had already passed away. Anthony was tormented by terrible pain and anguish because he had instructed him to stay there. This made the situation too late to change. Anthony did not know how to face his wife, who was about to give birth. He was uncertain. Meanwhile, in another location, the assassin Nick was leisurely. He lay on the boat, enjoying his retirement life. This peace was suddenly shattered by an unwelcome visitor. It's unclear why CIA agent John K. visited and brought a special proposal. It's unclear. He wanted Nick to return and cooperate with the government. He hoped to carry out an assassination mission. The targets are 3 criminals who influenced the American economy. At first, Nick had no intention of agreeing. He thought retirement life was peaceful and free. He believed this, but he was drawn into a dangerous conflict. He was not supposed to be, but John presented a reason he couldn't refuse. The first target on the death list is a man named LaRusso. His name is that of a man. This name is from an old case over 20 years ago. It reminds me of the time when Nick was in Miami. The operation miserably failed. After that operation, LaRusso seemed to have disappeared without a trace. He vanished suddenly, as if he had disappeared from the world. Now that he has reappeared, not only the CIA, but Nick too wants him out of this world. He intensely resented the desire to eliminate, and for that reason, Nick gladly accepted this mission. John K. drew out the trump card and presented it to Nick. He told him that if he refused the mission, the CIA would carry out all the details of the Miami operation. He warned that if the information leaked, Nick would certainly become a target of LaRusso's insane revenge. In fact, 20 years ago, Nick had received a tracking order from LaRusso. At that time, he orchestrated a gas leak incident that resulted in the tragic death of LaRusso's wife and children. However, that day LaRusso was out and there was no time for him to return home. Fortunately, he survived, and since then LaRusso has targeted Nick. He began a mad revenge against him, even going so far as to hire someone to brutally kill Nick's wife. He even went so far as to hire someone to kill her. As a result, Nick had no choice but to cut off all contact to keep his son from falling into LaRusso's hands. He had to take measures to ensure his son would not fall into LaRusso's hands. After that, John continued to introduce Nick to 2 other targets. They were a Turk named Bora and a man named Moose who had frequent contact with LaRusso. According to CIA intelligence analysis, which had a very close relationship, LaRusso is suspected of plotting a terrorist attack targeting the United States. He is suspected of plotting a terrorist attack targeting the United States. Therefore, it is likely that the cargo he is transporting to Mexico contains weapons necessary for the attack. This is highly likely. Thus, for Nick, it became an urgent task to swiftly eliminate LaRusso and his accomplices. Meanwhile, Anthony sank into sadness all day after losing his companions, losing his former decisiveness. He had also lost his former decisiveness, and the police chiefs in Mexico were watching this. They were worried that Anthony's depressed mood would affect his future missions. Therefore, they suggested that Anthony move to a different position. However, Anthony clearly refused. At this time, his mind was solely focused on how to catch Chico. leaving no room to pay attention to the drug eradication work. He had no luxury to pay attention to it. According to the latest investigation information, that warehouse did not contain illegal items. All the cargo was imported from Asia. This is a decorative lamp. This situation has left Anthony and his associates at a standstill. They were stuck and temporarily didn't know where to search for clues. While everyone was at an impasse, a colleague brought in the latest investigation files regarding the warehouse owner. This individual is a Turk named Bora, who is currently wanted in many countries. After that, Anthony and the captain met Bora to ask about the situation, but Bora claimed he had no acquaintance with Chico. His next words further surprised Anthony and the captain. He expressed his intention to betray LaRusso for freedom, but the problem is that Anthony and his team do not know who LaRusso is. Since they didn't know, Bora was forced to teach the two drug enforcement officers about counter-terrorism knowledge. He introduced LaRusso as a very ruthless terrorist. Compared to that man, even Lindralen is just ancient text. Currently, that man is planning a terrorist attack on America and is in the warehouse. The supplies are the materials prepared for the attack. We need to confirm whether Bora's words are true. To verify whether Bora's words were true, Anthony and the captain decided to contact the FBI for investigation. As the investigation progressed, Bora, he made excessive demands, insisting on luxury hotel services without illness. He sought to enjoy it further to sign the waiver agreement. He also requested the presence of his lawyer. At the same time, Nick sought the secret commission by the CIA. Having officially accepted the death sentence, he sought the secret that had been gathering dust for 7 years. He retrieved a gun from a secret hideout that had been gathering dust for 7 years, changed the license plates, and drove towards the coast. Just after finishing the preparations, Bora appears with a call from the CIA regarding the hotel. This call is what officially starts Nick's assassination plan. He quietly, carrying his equipment, he headed towards the building across from the hotel and was very inconspicuous. Finding a location, he set up the sniper rifle aimed at the hotel room. At this time, Bora, he was unaware of the impending danger and was discussing the differences between the east and west with the staff. Just as Nick was about to pull the trigger, there was a sudden knock on the hotel room door. In fact, Anthony had just received notification from the FBI to immediately escort Bora to the border. He had just received the order to complete the handover. With Anthony's arrival, Nick lost the best opportunity to fire. However, he didn't give up. At the hotel's main entrance, Anthony was trying to take Bora to the car, when suddenly, Bora was shot right there. Anthony immediately sensed something was wrong from the building across. He was determined to rush in that direction and catch the driver hiding in the darkness. The moment Anthony, resolute, noticed the anomaly, he put away his weapon. He vanished without a trace. Soon after, news spread that Bora had been assassinated, and the captain was extremely angry. Initially, he thought there was a mole within the team, and that information had leaked. Although he was there, he never imagined that everything was being manipulated by the CIA behind the scenes. Despite Bora's death, the police found important clues from Gaha's phone before he could be caught. They discovered that Bora frequently visited a club. Furthermore, Gaha was also a VIP member there. Therefore, the captain assigned Anthony the task of monitoring the club and hoped to capture Bora's accomplice. Anthony planned to install a listening device to grasp the situation in the club's VIP room. But since he was not a member, he was made to sit coldly in the lobby outside the server, and it was not easy for him to enter the VIP room. However, when Anthony noticed Meena, the club's chef, the situation began to change rapidly. Waiting for Meena's shift to end, he sought a reason to casually strike up a conversation. Little did he think that Meena would consider him a malicious person, and she did not want to be considerate towards him. Anthony had no choice but to reveal that he was a police officer. At this moment, Meena revealed this and softened the police's position to talk with him. When Anthony agreed and learned that she wanted help with the wiretap, she took the opportunity to set her own condition and asked Anthony to take her to a cooking school in New York. However, Anthony did not agree. Meena decided to obtain a favor from Anthony by providing him with information. With her help, the wiretap was quickly installed under the table in the VIP room. As night fell, darkness covered the entire city, as if a storm was approaching. Nick, who seemed to signal this, also shifted his attention to the club. Clearly, he had obtained accurate information and knew that the target would appear here. After a while, a group dressed in luxurious suits entered the outdoor VIP area. Through the installed wiretap, Anthony clearly heard the conversation. He was able to identify their identities and conspiracy. Indeed, they were proceeding with a deal. The buyers were LaRusso and his child Bunmus. These two were also Nick's next targets. LaRusso, the target, was trying to buy a device that could control a natural power system from the scientist's accident. He was planning to use this to cause severe losses to the socio-economy. To demonstrate the power of this device, the incident occurred. He approached the window and pressed the switch, plunging the entire city into darkness. All the lights went out, and even Anthony's surveillance devices were instantly disabled. After Zeko operated it again, the city became bright once more. At that moment, Nick entered the club wearing a black hooded hat and carrying a silenced gun. Nick's shooting ability was exceptionally accurate, with each bullet aimed precisely at its target. Combined with grenades, he caused chaos, rushing forward like a tree and quickly approaching the writing room. You should not see Nick as an old man. However, his movements were swift. You should not see Nick as an old man. However, his movements were quick. He was powerful. In just a few minutes, he easily took down the guard blocking the path. The remaining guards fled amidst the chaos, protecting Larso and Zeko as they made their escape. Nick successfully eliminated a secondary target named Moss at Anthony's observation point. He witnessed a fierce gunfight erupt within the club. He gripped his gun tightly and rushed to the scene at top speed. Unfortunately, he was alone when he arrived at the scene, just as the incident was fleeing. Anthony had only seen them starting the car. He fired 2 shots, but he couldn't stop the enemy from escaping, right in front of him this time. Anthony doubted Nick because this action yielded no results. When Anthony burst into the club, Nick was filming Moose's corpse. Nick, who was filming, saw Anthony approach him with a gun. He quickly threw a grenade and took that opportunity to hide. Thus, Anthony ended up returning empty-handed after yet another futile chase. Early the next morning, the police quickly cordoned off the club where the shootout occurred and began investigating last night's events. Mira arrived as usual, but was shocked by the scene before her. She stood frozen in shock and looked for Anthony, wondering what had happened. She asked if last night's shootout was related to him. Anthony, with a serious expression and without saying much, told Mira to leave this place first. After saying that, he intended to explain to her. The investigators were reviewing the surveillance footage. After a long period of focused observation and detailed analysis of each individual piece, he discovered an important detail. The remote control in the accident's hand was natural, and was the perpetrator responsible for causing the blackout. Anthony stared at this clue, quickly running through various possibilities in his mind. He boldly hypothesized that last night's blackout was merely an experiment and that there might be a bolder conspiracy behind it. At the same time, a tense atmosphere filled the heavily guarded secret base. LaRusso's eyes were filled with ambition and desire. He understood the power of the device he held in his hand, knowing it could throw society into chaos. Without hesitation, he vowed to the accident that if he continued the research and development of this device, he would pay 3 times the amount to the accident. The accident was very hesitant about this proposal, knew that in order to carry out his secret dark plan, without hesitation he promised the accident, if he continued the research and development of this device, he said he would pay 3 times the amount for the accident. The accident was very hesitant about this proposal. If LaRusso could control the power systems of the entire city and the whole of America, the results would deliver a devastating blow to the national economy, causing many people to find themselves in dire straits. The temptation of money is like a cruel chain, and ultimately, the incident agreed to LaRusso's demands. He knew that this decision could lead the entire country to certain doom with no escape. However, there were no other options in the current situation. Shortly thereafter, the police discovered that LaRusso was planning to hold a party. Consequently, that evening, Anthony, dressed elegantly as a wealthy gentleman, calmly stepped into the party's venue. He hoped to find evidence of LaRusso and his adversaries within this gathering of various individuals at the party, and LaRusso and his associates were carefully monitoring everyone's actions on the surveillance screens. The incident too was among this group, carefully watching the behaviors of everyone at the party. The incident was also part of this group. He who was accidentally outside excitedly told the owner that he was Anthony. LaRusso ordered an incident to watch over Anthony and determine what his intentions were. At that moment, Anthony was unaware of the impending danger, comfortably wandering around the party in search of LaRusso and the incident. Just then, a familiar shadow caught his attention, which was Nick, who had shot someone at the club. As Anthony leaned in to check his phone, he suddenly disappeared from the crowd. Anthony hurriedly chased after him outside, but coincidentally ran into Mina in the corner outside. After the club closed, Mina had to look for temporary work to sustain herself. Seeing Mina, Anthony, who suddenly disappeared in the crowd, hurriedly chased outside, but outside, after accidentally meeting Mina in a corner, the club closed, and Mina started to establish herself. Seeing Mina, who had to look for a temporary job, Anthony, it was as if he had found a lifebuoy. He hurriedly asked her if she had seen an old man somewhere. Mina said she saw him getting into a red jeep. While they were talking, the red jeep slowly left the parking lot. Anthony hurriedly urged Mina to chase after him. Thanks to Mina's skilled driving, they closely followed Nick's car. Eventually they found themselves at the port. They found the man in a nearby parking lot, but Anthony did not continue the pursuit. Instead, he took Mina to the top of the mountain, where they shared their thoughts over drinks. The two slowly opened up to each other while drinking. A tipsy, Anthony spoke about his childhood. He mentioned that his mother had been a beautiful man. She said this when he was still very young, and his father he was left in the care of his grandparents, which is why memories of his parents are just vague fragments from childhood. Only fragments of memories existed. Mina deeply empathized with Anthony's past. Their emotions flowed smoothly between them, like two rivers crossing the surrounding atmosphere, creating a harmony also grew ominous, without them realizing it. The next morning, Anthony appeared at the port early. He utilized the parking lot, waiting for the red chip to appear, and then, soon, Anthony confirmed Nick leaving the parking lot in his car. He hurriedly started his car and followed him. This time, no matter what happened, he couldn't let Nick escape. Anthony had sufficient reason to stop Nick, as he was driving a police vehicle. There was a good reason for stopping Nick. He saw Anthony approaching and unconsciously gripped his gun tightly with his right hand, preparing to fire, in case the situation worsened and he needed to flee. No one expected. Although he hadn't done it, Anthony approached and suddenly called Nick Dad. In other words, Nick was Anthony's only father. When Anthony was in the second year of junior high school, Nick cruelly abandoned his mother and child and quietly disappeared for many years. When Nick left, he saw his grown son before him and felt an indescribable surge of emotions. He knew he had the duty to provide Anthony with an appropriate explanation. He was aware of this obligation, and in fact, Nick's job was to carry out secret missions for the government. Due to the nature of his work, which was special and highly classified, he had no choice but to cut off his relationship for the safety of his family. On the day Anthony's mother was murdered, Nick feared that he would bring greater danger to his son. Since there was no other way, he left while carrying the pain. He ended up shouldering all the dangers of this job alone. After understanding his father's suffering, Anthony finally chose to forgive. Before leaving, Nick handed his son the mobile phone and told him to save it for when he was in trouble. I was told to call a certain phone number, but as I approached the car, Koji suddenly appeared with his subordinates. He suddenly burst out with his subordinates. The two coordinated to subdue Anthony. They subdued him, and Nick was hit so hard that he lost consciousness right there. At that moment, a car came speeding in, with Anthony inside. Nick had just reunited with his son, and he couldn't accept losing him again. Fortunately, the cell phone he had given to Anthony was equipped with GPS, which allowed him to not lose track of Anthony. The place where Anthony was taken was a cultural center where a party had previously been held. At that time, Koji was nervously adjusting the device. It was only after the adjustments were completed that he saw LaRusso was brought to the scene. LaRusso received the information and immediately appeared and questioned Anthony about the reasons for always surveilling him. Anthony revealed that his target was Chico, and that Chico had previously shot one of his associates. Upon hearing Anthony's accusation, which he stated frankly, Chico felt extremely uncomfortable. Afraid of being blamed by his master, he remained silent and attacked Anthony. As LaRusso mercilessly brutalized him, he tried to continue his questioning. Just then, the phone Nick had handed to Anthony suddenly began to ring. It was clear that Nick was making the call, and he was demanding that LaRusso release Anthony. He said that if he didn't, he wouldn't hold back this sword. Upon realizing that Anthony was the son of his enemy, LaRusso became more intrigued than ever. Taking a knife in hand, he attempted to kill Anthony right there. However, at that moment, the building was suddenly engulfed in darkness. LaRusso believed this was Chico's experiment, but he was completely unaware that everything was Nick's doing. He had no idea that it was all part of Nick's plan. At that moment, Nick was transformed into an assassin in the dark, quietly infiltrating the building to silently take out each of LaRusso's men, shooting down the armed guards one by one. When the gunfire was heard, LaRusso realized for the first time that he was in a very unfavorable situation. Therefore, with the help of his bodyguards, LaRusso quickly retreated. Nick used this device to free Anthony from his ropes and rescue him, while the police quickly received reports and swiftly sealed off the scene, where the shot bodyguards were found along with a device that had recently been successfully developed. However, no one knew exactly what it was used for. After that, Nick returned Anthony to the harbor cruiser. That night, while Anthony was trying to rest, he suddenly received a call from Mina. However, on the other end of the line was the voice of Chico. It seemed that they had realized the connection between Anthony and Mina. Therefore, they kidnapped her and used Anthony as leverage to force Mildred to submit. Anthony was filled with a burning desire to save Mina, and Nick was hurrying to prepare for this. After learning about it, I decided to go out with my son and take care of the LaRusso guys. Anthony, armed, charged into the happy room. Chico, holding Mina as a hostage, acted completely unafraid and very calmly. Anthony, who had acted this way, found himself at a dead end and temporarily had to put down his weapon. Shortly after, Chico, following the boss's orders, made Anthony make him call his father. Apparently, they are targeting not only Anthony but also here. They seem to have the intention of capturing the immortal, and Nick is also targeting him. The battleship, as if the weight of the battleship was cut off in an instant, gunfire ripped through the night. Nick shot Chico in the chest with perfect accuracy. Seeing this, Anthony charged at the giant. He charged at him, but he didn't think he would have astonishing combat power. Despite being seriously injured, Anthony found it difficult to control him. Nick was in time, thanks to saving his son. Under the threat of the two, Chico confessed that LaRusso was hiding for his life. He confessed to hiding in LaRusso's house, and Nick found it remarkable to hear the starting point. He came up with a plan, instructing Chico to search for LaRusso. If Chico cooperated, not only would he protect his life, But there was also a possibility of earning a reward. If he didn't cooperate, Nick would surely send him to meet his maker immediately. It would seem, as the scene shifts, Chico was LaRusso. He was demanding payment for the reward, and he would respond to the demand anyway. He manufactured the device, but LaRusso was seeking payment because the device had fallen into the police's hands. He refused to make the payment. Not only that, like LaRusso, the ruthless man shot Chico just as his subordinate was about to do so. It was clear that Nick, who had informed them of his return, was back with them. It was clear that the bag Anthony came back with was with Nick. The moment LaRusso ordered to open the bag, immortality struck almost simultaneously. Drawing their guns, the people in the room were quickly subdued. Meanwhile, LaRusso was dazed, unable to comprehend what was happening to his life. Nick, knowing she was innocent and had nothing to do with it, instructed to leave the scene and call the police for help. He gave instructions to call for help. At that moment, an overconfident bodyguard tried to attack someone, but unexpectedly went down immediately. Under the cooperation of an indomitable spirit, the bodyguards in the room fell one after another. LaRusso, knowing he couldn't escape, tried to buy his life with money, but Nick clearly refused. He had to eliminate LaRusso. Knowing that they could never rest in peace, they shot the man to take him down. They fired 2 shots to take him down. Chico saw that they had achieved their goal and requested that they keep their promise and pay the reward. Nick had Chico change to another profession, thinking that with his IQ, he could never become a hitman. He never imagined it would end up as a joke, and after a while, the police captain and the people, they came to the scene to clean up with him and discovered Chico stuffed into a body bag. He was the only survivor left at the scene. In the end, Anthony and Mina got together, and the movie ended here. This is a typical Hollywood action movie, showcasing a mature storytelling. The story demonstrates the level of industrialists and follows a retired former agent cooperating with agents to prevent cyber attacks. It is the case that independent parallel editing is smooth. The 2 tasks gradually converge on a common goal, creating 2 parallel stories. The director creates tension from the anime Tress Rescue. He has worked on many B-grade action films. Some audience members think the script is outdated, but it adheres to the conventions of the action genre. By adhering to these conventions, it meets the audience's expectations. As an engaging entertainment film, the director uses surveillance footage and digital data. Using the interface as a visual symbol, it creates a sense of invisible threat. The action scenes create a sense of pressure, highlighting the film's innovation. They are highlights of the film and utilize a realistic close-quarters combat style. Red Oran is a groundbreaking work. It may not be, but in terms of production quality, the film proves the survival of mid- and low-budget action films among the dominance of superhero works. I really enjoyed this film, which demonstrates the survival of action films. However, this sense of satisfaction reflects the innovative significance of films in this genre. If the director can delve deeper into the motivations and characters in the sequel and build better roles, then this series has the potential to become a classic in the history of action movies. It has the potential to become a classic brand. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Make sure to do that, as there are still many great movies to come. See you next time.